So that's the first thing to becoming successful, is defining who you want to work with. Who is your ideal client? Because if you're taking on several clients, different mediums, your conversations start getting very awkward. Your tech stack gets very awkward, and your profit line starts getting really awkward as well.
You're listening to the Spotlight edition of The Successful Bookkeeper with your host, Louie Prosperi. Listen each week as inspiring guests share their secrets of success to help you increase your confidence, work smarter, and build a business you love. This episode of The Successful Bookkeeper is brought to you by PureBookkeeping.com, the proven system to grow your bookkeeping business.
Welcome back to the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. I am Louie Prosperi. Today's Spotlight episode is going to be amazing. I am very, very excited to have our guest as the partnership manager of Ignition and the bookkeeper extraordinaire herself, the owner of Moore's Detail, which is now going on its 17th year, which is amazing. Welcome, Jennie Moore, to the show.
Oh, well, thank you, Louie. Yes, I'm very excited to be here with my fellow bookkeepers. And yes, today is going to be quite the conversation. It's something I'm quite passionate about, and I can't wait to get started. So thank you for having me today, Louie.
Fantastic. Now, just in case some of our listeners don't know all about Jennie, which I know some might not know, most of them probably do, is tell us a little bit about your career path, like how you started in bookkeeping, what made you start Moore's Details, and why you wanted to then take on two jobs at the same time, right? And do that.
Yes. Well, one is I'm a firm believer in always following my passion. So that's really the guiding light. But if I were to, show a little bit of my ego right now, what's led me to be here today is with my practice starting almost 17 years ago, I was in a corporate finance job in the automotive industry, very sort of stressful. And when I became a mother, I knew that I needed to be closer to home. And I thought, hey, let's start a bookkeeping business from home with a baby, because that's got to be easy. It wasn't.
Right.
I just got to say, if any of you are thinking about this right now, reach out to me on LinkedIn and I will help you.
Well, let's actually start with that. Actually, I know we haven't finished, but that is a great topic, because
it is.
I don't know from your perspective, but I've been in the certification business for a while. I've taught and mentored accounting and bookkeeping firms. And what the funny thing is, it seems like everybody thinks it's almost like being a real estate agent. You just, put up a shingle and away you go. And Jennie, you've lived that. You can tell people how that's not the case, right?
Yeah, it is not the case. It is not the case. And believe me, when baby number 2 and baby number 3 came along, working from home and everything, it's a really interesting dynamic. I'll tell you one thing. Those 3 beautiful daughters of mine taught me something that I would never learn in business, and that is tough negotiation. So if you are up for the challenge, it's a great avenue. It's very rewarding. It does have its balance issues, especially when you're in the house and trying to keep paper away from the crayons of toddlers. But so what I needed when I was at home with the 3 kids is I needed interaction, like really badly. Right. There was days I wasn't leaving the house. And social media really became that for me. It became that outlet to my, farmhouse in the middle of Foxborough, Ontario, where, there wasn't a lot of socialization going on. And that's when I started meeting other people just like me, adopting cloud technology. And we just learned from each other and gobbled up anything that could automate this craziness of bookkeeping we were experiencing. There has to be a better way. And that's what led me to really stick with More Details and grow it to where it is adopting technology, making things easier, and frankly, just trying to keep paper away from my kids. If that was the main goal for me going to the cloud, it was to avoid paper coming into the house. my kids finding ways to draw on it, and then having to shamelessly give it back to my clients. But with that journey and the passion of learning, I realized I really liked working with industry. I really liked working with SaaS, that software as a service. That's what Ignition is. That's what many of the apps we use is. And I decided that I wasn't having as much fun reconciling as I used to. I still like it. I don't get the thrill of trying to find that penny anymore. So I more or less work on the practice and not in it. And I take that time now and apply it to industry to help our fellow bookkeepers and accounting professionals leverage technology, influence product. And that's what my role is with Ignition.
So you've become that's an interesting influencer of product. Can you expand on what that really means? How do you become an influencer of product? Because of the Successful Bookkeeper and how we're integrating and making sure that we build a very interactive community, the partners that we engage in they're hungry to get feedback. And I think the more people that can become influencers of product benefits everybody. So how did you get into that?
Well, one is I became a customer of Ignition. In this particular instance, I was a customer of Ignition in 2016 after royally screwing up an engagement, which I'm sure we can talk about at some point. So in 2016, I figured, there was an app for everything. So there has to be an app to fix this. So I became really involved with digitizing an engagement process, finding the optimal sales tool, finding ways to save time, and frankly, make more money. And as I've been working with Ignition and many other apps as well, I found this passion where, yes, being face-to-face on Zoom, if you will, because that's the new face-to-face, giving the product feedback, like having that knowledge of working with a developer that has the incredible skill to do magical stuff, like stuff that I cannot even imagine learning. And they look at us with the same passion, like, wow, how the complex problems you have. And then just the joy of working together to solve a real problem, not just for Jennie Moore, but for the entire industry. Like, this is something we can pop the cap on and really automate something or really create more harmonious workflows in our firm. And how I came to do that was just really getting into the faces of SaaS products, being willing to give the feedback and showing, in real life what the problem is. And that's following the passion. And I believe all of us as bookkeepers, we have the passion to influence product. We have we have the ability and the expertise to influence even legislation. There's so much we can do. We just need to use our voice to do it.
Well, that's great. And I'm assuming that's how, based on the influencer feedback, the connection, is that how you became one of the voices of Ignition going forward?
I would say so. I guess I just bothered enough people.
Right, they figured we better hire her. She's just.
It's like, man, she's just. Well, and it's been really interesting, yeah. And part of the passion of product is one pain point. Like that's one pain point, right? Is how do we solve problems in our product? How do we create the features and stopping product from going in one direction where you're like, no, that's not what we need. We need this. And seeing that pivot. And a lot of it is that it's just being involved. I would say the other factor for me joining Ignition was the passion for education. So yes, we do engagements really well. Yes, we do proposals and payments and workflows and streamlining everything. But there's so much more education that we provide. And I wanted to be part of that education, not only for the team of Ignition, but for our industry to know, like, hey, I've been here. I've screwed up. I know there's a better way. And Ignition, yes, is part of that, but there's so much more with other apps we use. And bringing that forward to help, I think, has been something that's been really great in this role.
That's really good. So here's something that you probably can answer, and this is probably from the mistakes you've made. Is and honestly, I'm going to be honest with you. If anybody says that they're successful because they've made no mistakes, something's wrong with that statement. All right.
That was my cackle right there. I
Yeah.
couldn't hold it
Okay.
back.
Right. We don't become successful being correct all the time, right? We usually make the mistakes, figure out what went wrong, and now we know what we're doing, right? Or we listen to someone, or the other option is we listen to someone who's made all the mistakes and we just don't do what they did, right? Basically.
Exactly.
Right? Those are the two ways we become successful, I think. So give us some of the key business successes that you had with Moore's Detail. Like, how did you solve some of the issues we all confront?
And this is the realistic viewpoint, Louie. Like, you're absolutely right. I was talking with Linda and Sarah yesterday, and we're talking just talking raw. Let's talk about the big hairy gorillas. Let's talk about our screw ups. Let's talk about what's painful and what's really, stopping us from being who we need to be in our business or whatever it may be. And Sarah and Linda, if you're listening, hello. I won't reveal the last names, but this is based on our conversation. So this is like my day to day, right? And what does it take to be successful as a bookkeeper, accounting professional, enrolled agent? It doesn't matter what we identify ourselves as. I think, just pure tenacity. If I was to really look at it, we need to be so strong as bookkeepers to adopt changing landscapes and being very tenacious, but also very forgiving of ourselves, right? Being very realistic. But if I were to look at what has helped me and maybe might help listeners today, one thing would be to be very focused on what exactly you want to do. What exactly do you want to do, whether it's professionally or personally? So professionally, since we're talking about our professional lives here, for me, it started with who I want to work with, because I royally screwed that up as well. I took on every client. Oh yeah, I took on every client because I did not value myself. Oh my gosh, I had a
Well, Jenny, I don't know if that's correct. I think you valued yourself perfectly the whole time. I think what people.
No.
Are you sure?
I'm being honest with you. In the very beginning, I did not value my services. I did not value, today I'm a very confident person because I have screwed up, Louie. I have. And so one is in the very beginning is, what type of clients do I want? So that's the first thing to becoming successful, is defining who you want to work with. Who is your ideal client? Because if you're taking on several clients, different mediums, your conversations start getting very awkward. Your tech stack gets very awkward, and your profit line starts getting really awkward as well.
Yeah. I love that. That is something that I preach. But here's what everybody says: that get the client or customer that you want. It's the one that pays. But
yes,
that's not what
that's
an
important attribute. Yeah, it's a fair exchange. I don't know about you, Louie, but when I go to Starbucks, I actually have to pay for the coffee.
Yeah, the one that pays is probably a good one,
right? Yeah, exactly. And really defining that and being true, and then really just constantly perfecting. You know what? Nothing's going to be perfect. It's just always you're a work in progress. I'm a work in progress. Right? My workflows are always a work in progress. What I do for industry is always a work in progress. Just being very humble to that, but start with having at least some sort of order in your bookkeeping practice, right? And that will help you in engaging with your customers, growing, being very laser focused on what you want to do. So defining those workflows, defining your scope, and articulating your value when things get a little hairy, when things go out of scope, right? We want to be sure we have our value and our confidence to be able to have those awkward conversations.
So you're hitting all the right topics. I mean, every time you hit something, out of scope. So here's the number one killer of profit for accounting and bookkeeping firms is out of scope work, right? If you're able to identify out of scope and acknowledge it and get it at the right timing, because sometimes we identify out of scope, but that's 6 months later.
Yes.
Which doesn't matter, right? But if you can identify it and time it, and also bill for it, then out of scope becomes a very profitable part of your business rather than a negative. Is that something that you've been able to overcome or master?
Absolutely. I'll be egotistic enough in this moment to say I love scope creep. I absolutely love it. I thrive on it because
Right.
I control it. Okay. And as accounting professionals, I just said control, and I know your ears just perked right up. But scope creep, you probably either are still trying to figure out what that terminology means, or you avoid it. So scope creep is when our clients ask us to do more than what we originally agreed to do, right? So, and you're not alone. I'm a big fan of these independent studies we're having done here at Ignition. And there's 88% of us as accounting professionals in one of our last studies that will avoid having an awkward conversation with a client. We'll avoid it. And maybe that comes down to, I don't really like that client. I'm afraid they're going to yell at me. Or I'm not confident enough to articulate my value. 88% of us, that's a mass amount of us that are doing that. And here's another statistic that I'm going to throw back. So in that same independent study that we had done by YouGov, on average, accounting professionals, by avoiding the awkward conversation, okay, so this is like what Louie has indicated. If we're going out of scope and we're just delaying that conversation 6 months, okay, maybe you're going to delay it another 6 months. Maybe you're just going to end up doing it because you're afraid of that conversation. On average, that is costing us as accounting professionals in our firms $76,000 US a year by not having a conversation with our clients.
So if we do the math, 10 years, it's $750,000 that you've lost.
Exactly. So managing scope and one would say avoiding scope creep. One, I just say it, articulating scope creep, making sure you have the right proposal outlined, making sure you have the right workflows defined, training your team to make sure that if it's not on their workflow, they are not to do it and not to avoid doing it.
Can you repeat that one? That last one is probably the most critical one related to training your team. I mean, at the end of the day,
your team. Yeah, really important. You can have the best defined engagement with Ignition. Yes, shameless plug. Surprise, surprise. Okay. However you're doing it, you can have the best well-defined engagement and proposal experience. You can have the best workflow of all. Like we integrate with many apps, and we know the Successful Bookkeeper has an amazing workflow platform as well. Okay, you can have the best workflows as well, but it comes down to the cadence and communication with your team to empower them to come to you if something isn't right. We train our children, we train everybody else, but sometimes we forget that our team needs the same training. So if Mr. Smith is asking for us to reconcile his Shopify account that he just implemented, but there's no Shopify clearing account or process in the workflow, what my team's responsibility is to do is message me on Slack. So we're big users of Slack. And internally, this is going to sound a little vulgar. The term we use is Slack slap Jennie. So when there's a problem or something feels weird.
But it sounds good, though. It's a Slack slap Jennie. Sounds good. I thought that's actually pretty cool.
Jennie has their back, right? So as my role is to manage scope, not manage reconciliations or data entry. Gosh, we don't even do that anymore. We have apps that do that. But My job is to listen to my team when they say, can you look at this request from our client to see if it's out of scope? And sure enough, if it is, my response to the individual is, let's say it's Mr. Smith again. He's quite the rascal. Hey, Mr. Smith, I think it is so great that you have implemented Shopify into your QuickBooks Online account. I love seeing you meet your goals. Now, think about what I just said. I like that you meet your goals. I think it's great that you meet your goals. So we identify scope as a reward. Hey, good for you for growing. We're going to go ahead and reconcile this, but we're going to be sending you a change order through our Ignition proposal system. So I'm going to need you to sign that in order for us to continue moving forward. We have a positive conversation with clients about when they go out of scope. I don't know about my listeners here today, but I only have one client in my stable of clients that will say to me, hey, Jenny, I got scope creep for you. None of the other ones do that. They just expect me to solve their problems.
Well, here's the reality, right? First of all, they're not in your business, so they don't know what's
exactly.
They don't really know what's added or not. They expect you to let them know, right? You're there to solve their problems, right?
Exactly.
And that's basically why. Now, if they have to pay you more,
then so
they expect you to tell them that. Right?
Exactly.
And usually they're fine with it as long as you explain it. I think the number one issue is transparency. I think what you're doing with your training of your team and making sure that this is highlighted either at the very beginning or just before it starts, it improves transparency. What no one really likes, and this is something that if we can get the entire industry to understand this, is surprise billing at the end.
No one likes that. It's not romantic at all. Yeah, it is.
No.
Negative client experience.
Right? I mean, if you talk to your customer base, I think two things that they complain most about is the surprise billing at the end, because I think they were sticker shock. And the other one is customer contact, right? They don't get enough of us, right? So usually that's one or two. And 9 out of 10 times when the customer does leave you, Jenny.
Yes.
Now, sometimes you're okay when they do leave. Some of them are not good customers, but I'm not talking about those ones. I'm talking about the ones that you would like to keep. It's usually one of those two items or both combined.
Exactly. And I'm going to say this. I wear my heart on my sleeve. I love my clients. And if they were to leave, that would feel really awkward for me, right? Yeah. So have the awkwardness now, like just have the conversations. And like Louie, what you had mentioned with an example, hey, for 6 months, you might have caught that you were doing this out of scope work. At that point, the client's like, well, Jenny, you've always done it. You have to have the conversation when the iron is hot. And most importantly, when we bring in clients, we explain to them that this is your engagement right now. Our goal is to help you grow and scale. Our package is going to grow and scale as we help you move. So we will be issuing change orders as you meet certain goals. Use the right positive terminology. And don't be afraid to have a conversation with a client about this. You're supporting them more. You're helping them grow more. Therefore, your services are growing more. So who should be paid more? You.
I have to be honest with you. I've never seen most customers, when the value is there, like I said, there are always bad customers. I know someone will give me an example of saying, well, that guy, well, fine. Some customers don't value you, and that's like you said,
that's a different topic. They're not the right fit. Right? Exactly.
So, but the majority of customers that you get, once you've explained the value and they understand the value and the value meets their needs, again, you have to meet their needs, not your needs, right? At the end of the day, they're willing to pay it. It's rare that they don't, So I want to talk about something here. You hit it on the head earlier on. I didn't want to interrupt, but you said tech stack, be very clear. And what brought up to my mind is digital mindset. And I think you call it you must get a digital first mindset first, right? You have,
Yes.
in our industry, you have to become digital. It's no longer the face-to-face meeting the customer is still there, and whether it's Zoom or in person, but the way we do work now, it's completely digital. Can you highlight that? And one of the things you brought up was too many tech stacks or too much diversity could be an issue. How did you solve that problem within your firm?
Yeah. Well, one is in adopting the digital mindset, my contributing factor was it was just taking up too much time doing manual data entry and,
Right.
Meeting with clients and babysitting paper. And we've all heard the pain points. So that was my transformation stage where I have to find so much technology to replicate this busy work. Because at that time, there was no team of more details. There was one person working crazy hours, and that was me. And I needed some of that time back, first of all, to sleep. Right. Maybe have a life in there. But so that was my driving force to adopt a digital mindset. Now, that came with a double-edged sword. I started adopting a digital mindset and finding all these apps. You know what I felt like? I felt like a kid in a candy store, and I was picking up all the candy until I got a tummy ache. I got a tummy ache because I had too many apps. I had so many apps. And the reason why I had so many apps is because I had so many clients with different needs. And then I realized the problem isn't the apps. The apps are great. The problem isn't me. I'm a smart girl. I can figure all these apps out. The problem is that I'm letting in way too many diverse clients into my organization. I need to start tightening up who I'm going to be doing work for. And for me, my secret sauce right now is professional services. I just love anything to do with professional services, e-commerce, that kind of stuff. You won't see me doing a lot of inventory or restaurants or legal. It's just not my forte because I've come to a point of realizing, hey, in these streams or in these niches or niches, these are the main tech stacks. These are the main apps I would use. And I found that when I stopped trying to adopt so many different apps, I was not only benefiting myself, but I was benefiting my team. My team was starting to get overwhelmed. We call that app overload in the industry. And I never thought about them. And I felt really remorseful at that point to go, oh, my ego and my thrive to learn actually impacted the productivity of my team and their confidence. So choosing your app stack is, I think, really important. And if you're curious as an owner like myself, there's many apps I work with and dabble with. And I really look at them to see, is that something I'm going to bring into my firm? Or is it something I'm going to put on pause, think about down the road? Or maybe it's not a good fit because it's a little bit more industry specific.
Well, let's be a little pro-ignition here. It doesn't matter what app we're talking about.
You need to have that one. No.
Well, the reason why I'm going to say that is actually that's exactly what I'm going to say. To be quite honest, is because Ignition, the core component. Now, Ignition has expanded and become a much more robust system. I'm not going to say that
it has, yeah.
But the core component, is the engagement letter. Or the engagement, automation of the engagement process. Let's put it that way, not the letter, but the process.
No, you're right. No, you have the right terminology.
It doesn't matter what niche market you're doing, because you're in professional services, your firm is. But if someone is in restaurants or in legal, the engagement letter app function is still critical to all of them. So
absolutely.
So we're going to, I know this is a bit of a plug, but at the end of the day, I'm going to say that you need a really good app or automation program that deals with that component. Do you agree with me? I know you're going to say yes,
would.
But
yeah.
But you as a professional bookkeeper and someone who tried other applications related to the engagement letter, that was something that really changed how you did business. No?
It certainly was. I have a personal story if you wish to hear it. If your
of
listeners would
course I
look.
would wish
Okay.
to hear it. Of
So
course.
I screwed up. I royally screwed up. And 2016, when I became an Ignition customer, was a result of this. I've spoken at a couple of events on this, and a lot of our bookkeeping peers and accounting friends have actually come up to me afterwards, like, you know what? Thank you for sharing the story. So it is a bit raw, but essentially, rolling back the time frame to 2016. Of course, Ignition was known as Practice Ignition back then, and the product has changed so much. But what I was doing back then was, Word is a great platform. It's a word processing platform. It's not great for my brand. But I was basically using Word and putting in a letter of engagement and, staying up to 3:00 in the morning and making sure that the right name was used in the scope, triple checking, double checking, finding something, a comma there, something like that. And it was just taking up so much time. Oh my gosh, it was just taking up so much time. And I was working with this one prospect, really good prospect, really exciting. We've had a lot of great chats back and forth. I knew exactly how to solve their problems. I knew what apps we were going to use. We were both very excited, and I sent that proposal off to be digitally signed. And I waited eagerly. This client was going to be paying me $1,000 a month. Nothing wrong with the budget. Money was there. Yep, absolutely. And
that's not a bad customer at $1,000 a month.
At that time, my goodness, I thought I won the lottery.
Jenny, forget about
even
that
now.
Time. Even now, it's a good customer.
It's a good customer. Yeah. Well, even especially back in 2016 for me, that was like a really big one. Right. And now that's my average, minimal client, if you will. But at that time, that was me growing and me finally coming into this stage. But I didn't hear anything back from this prospect. And so, you get the dodged emails and stuff like that. I thought, I'm going to call this person up. Something's wrong. And sure enough, there was. And, I asked, have you gotten our proposal? Just wanted to make sure. And there's that, that awkward pause when you know something's wrong. It's like when your kids are saying to you, like, I broke your grandmother's vase. Like, it's just that awkward. Right.
I got it.
And so I'm like, oh, here it comes. And they're like, well, we decided to go with another provider. Like, oh, my heart just went right into my stomach and, felt really sick. But I thought, you know what? I need to know why. I'm always, I'm a work in progress. I said that at the beginning of this podcast. And so I had the audacity and the curiosity and somehow the courage enough to ask, what did we do wrong? How could I have won this business? And there was, again, another little break in the conversation. And I'm glad I asked, but I wasn't ready for the answer. And the prospect had indicated, hey, Jenny, I loved how you communicated with us. You could solve, you really had us with how you were able to solve our problems and what apps we would be using and processes. And that was really great. But when we got your proposal, Jenny, like, how are you going to fix our problems if you haven't even fixed your own onboarding process? And I went, ouch.
Yeah, that hurt.
And then that hurt. And I went, okay. And I thought it was done. And so I kind of took a moment because, your first sort of feeling is ego and defensiveness. And I went, no, settle back down. And then the next, sort of wave came at me like, Jenny, that process is very archaic. And I went, oh. And I don't know about you, Louie, but the word archaic and Jennie Moore shall not be used together.
I guess in 2016 that hurt, and that's never going to happen again, right?
And losing that business was what I call my $12,000 mistake, and that was yearly revenue, right? Like $1,000 a month. Very, very simple, easy. I was able to articulate. And I knew exactly how this would have helped my business. So that's when I looked for an application that would automate a lot of this letter of engagement, create a beautiful proposal experience that my customers could understand in their own words, use mediums like Vimeo and Loom to create videos, the same way clients were coming to me by looking at my YouTube channel. And, and most of all, articulated my value and my competence. So now it's a sales tool for me, and it keeps me compliant. It keeps me paid. It keeps the workflows tight for that scope we talked about. And I've been a paying customer. People ask it, since you're an Ignition employee, do you get it for free? No. I'm a big girl and I pay my own bills. Yeah. I pay for the Pro platform, and it's not a cost for me. It's a revenue generator, and that's my story. That's my screw up.
Well, like we said at the beginning, success. The only way you get to success is through mistakes, right? And
yes.
And here's the big lesson that I think we should make sure that everybody listens to Jennie. Jennie didn't just take the silence and not respond and find out. Some people would have said, okay, they left us, they're not going with us, move on. But what you did, which is unique, and I think we should emphasize this, when you do get a no or no thank you, if you can, and the other side is willing to talk to you, because not all the time, right? I mean, sometimes they just don't want to tell you why they left. But without asking, you never know. So I'm going to tell everyone what Jennie did was amazing, because not only did she pick up the phone and talk to the person, she asked what we did wrong. And when she got the feedback, that feedback is critical. When you do something wrong, sometimes we don't know when we did something wrong, right? Because we don't get that feedback. And I think when you do lose a bid or a proposal, if there's an opportunity to find out why,
do it.
I strongly recommend to do it.
Exactly. And that's why I'm so passionate about owning the awkward conversation. We have a whole campaign we've developed here at Ignition because it resonated so strongly with me, right? It's like, own the awkward. Own it. I know it's hard. Listen, I know it's hard. I know because I had a pitiful hourly rate. I was not valuing myself. I had clients being rude to me and taking advantage of my services. I know what you're going through. But it wasn't until I owned that awkward conversation and I started learning and really being an empowered woman in business and fixing my problems that I was able to get to where I am now. And now also having even more fun working with a product like Ignition. So if there's one piece of advice, take the awkward conversation. Have it, like own it, hear it, talk about it, get the yes, there's feelings involved. Yes, if that client is super edgy with you, then your job from Jennie Moore is to ask, is that client do they belong in your business? Do they belong?
I like that. I know we're not talking about Ignition as much, but we're talking about a lot of experiences that professionals have either experienced and have not done or have avoided. And the two things that I own the awkward conversation should be a catchphrase for you guys. Number two is that when you own the awkward conversation and you get it, you have to ask yourself two questions, right? The first question is, and you have to be open-minded, right? You can't be defensive because your feelings are going to get hurt, right, Jennie? It's just going to happen, right?
Let the ego go.
Right, let it go. And then number one is you're going to ask yourself was it something that I did wrong that I can correct? Or was it the customer? Now, the customer question should always be second, right? Because if you can't find something honestly wrong, the chances are it could be the wrong fit, right? And that's okay. But and here's the thing: when you find out it's the wrong fit, identify that customer profile. But identify that customer profile. Yeah. And when you see it again, you don't have to work as hard because you know that's going to be the wrong fit. Right?
It's the wrong fit. Exactly. Yeah. Louie, this is exactly it. Like, I still get some through our process, our sales process. Right. And I own the awkward conversation. Like when my team is frustrated, my client's frustrated, and then I become frustrated and I look at the situation, I'm like, I call up the client and I say, you know what? This isn't working. It's not a personal issue. It's not that we're bad bookkeepers and you're a bad client. This isn't a good fit. I'm terminating our services effective this date. And there's no if, ands, or buts. It's just very clear. It's just not a good fit. And Louie, you said it first. That is so true. Think about fit.
Yeah, no, it's the hardest part for a professional is to identify the right customer for what they want to do. I mean, at first, when you start your practice, you take on everybody, and honestly, sometimes you have to because you don't know what you want to do, right? So you take you sample. I guess that's a good way to sample.
That is a very good way of saying it. Exactly.
Right, but at the end of the day, after you've sampled, you got to identify the laneway, right? You have to, and you did it. You said it again. I mean, you're constantly growing. You're constantly, you're in a learning mode all the time. If you're an entrepreneurial, professional business accountant or whatever you want to call yourself, a bookkeeper, running your own practice, you're always in a learning mode, right? And I think for most of us in this profession, one of the things we do enjoy is growth, personal growth, financial growth, definitely. I think everybody enjoys that. But personal growth is something that makes us want to stay.
Exactly. That's it. And why put so many hours into something if you're not going to have fun doing it? Right. Wow. So,
well, Jenny, I think we could talk for another hour and a half on this. I mean, we have so much in common, and I've really enjoyed this conversation. So I'm looking forward to having you back and talking more about your experiences and how Ignition is becoming the cash flow and application form that professional bookkeepers and accountants should start integrating into their program. So what I'd like from you, Jenny, is there any way that they can get more information, or if they want to know more about Ignition, what should they do?
Absolutely. So I believe in the show notes, we're going to have a couple of links for everybody. We do have a special promotion for followers of the Successful Bookkeepers. It is 50% off for 3 months with our Pro or Scale plan. I personally run Pro and I love it. We have a lot of great campaigns and webinars and educational things that happen with the Successful Bookkeeper. We have resources within our products. So I would encourage you to check the show notes. All the information's there. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. Follow me as Jennie Moore. I love having conversations with accounting professionals. And if there's one thing I could say right now, to grow your business, remember first to value yourself.
Fantastic. That is great. I recommend everybody to do exactly what Jenny's telling you to do, to be quite honest. Jenny, thank you for being on the show. That wraps up another episode of the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. To learn more about today's guest and to access all of the valuable free business resources, you can go to thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Until next time, goodbye and have a wonderful day.
You've been listening to the Spotlight edition of The Successful Bookkeeper with Louie Prosperi. For more information and to access the resources mentioned in this episode, please visit us at thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Thank you for listening and have a great week.